Breaking the cycle to step forward. Authentic conversations from lived experience and a professional perspective in overcoming abuse with Chris Tuck and Beverley Ann.
Hello and welcome to Breaking the Cycle to Step Forward. My name's Beverley Ann and I'm here with my wonderful co-host.
She has to say that, everyone. Hi, it's Chris Tuck here. And she says it lovely every single time.
And you are my wonderful co-host. We do this well together. And this episode is actually episode number 60, which means it's the 60th episode of Chris and I talking on a podcast. And this week we're going to be talking about the impact of witnessing domestic violence. And there's a reason for that, why we're coming from that aspect. And we like to explain a little bit. Chris, do you want to start with the explanation?
Yeah, I mean, in the main, people do not understand why the person who is the victim in a domestic violence relationship, why they don't just leave, and why they stay. That is the main concept. They don't understand it. You know, if I was being beaten up or coercively controlled, then I would just leave. And it's not as simple as that. And we know that. And we've spoken about that before. But the aspect that we wanted to speak about is the children and the young people who are witnessing and growing up in these domestic violence households. Now, this is not to throw any blame or judgment on the victims of this crime who do stay because of whatever reason, but usually it's because they're too frightened to leave, because they feel that either the children will be then abused or they are fearful of their lives, literally. So if they do stay or if they leave, children in those relationships witness it and they are harmed by it. And that's acknowledged in law now and has been for a couple of years. But you and I, Bev, we both grew up in domestic violence households. So we're going to talk about it from our perspective. But I also know that you've had a kind of relationship that was harmful yourself as an adult. So, of course, we can go into that in more detail if you want to.
Yes, and I think the important thing is to just quickly go over is domestic violence. It's what that encompasses.
Yeah.
I can't say the word.
Encompasses.
What that includes. Encompasses. That's
yeah.
word. Includes. Because we do automatically think of, oh, that's where people get hit and there's bruises and there's cuts. But we also know that that's not just on its own. There's coercive control in there. There's emotional control. There's physical control, as in the physicality of finances.
Yeah, 100%.
And there's also sexual violence.
Yeah.
You know, that's all part of it within a domestic violence situation. And it doesn't necessarily have to be partner on partner. And I'm saying partner on partner because some of the literature that we read is very historic. So it's all about men being violent towards women. But we know that whilst that's a large percentage, it can be in same-sex couples as well. And it doesn't necessarily have to be partners, husband, wife, husband. It can be children and parents. So we're looking at this as a whole, but as you said, it's not about blame. We're exploring this.
Yeah.
And we're going to start off with our own experiences as children ourselves and the impact. So Chris, for you initially, because you were in several different households where you experienced domestic violence in different forms.
Yeah, so with my mum and my dad, my biological parents, they were in a domestic violence relationship and it was physical. But back in 1977, when my mum left the family home, there were no shelters for women then. And mum didn't have any money to look after us. So we actually was left with my father, who then got a lot together with this woman a couple of doors down, and they remarried, and they were in a domestic violence relationship. But I think whereas my dad was more of the perpetrator against my mum, when he went into a relationship with my stepmom, I think it was more of a her was she was the biggest perpetrator in their relationship from where I was sitting. So other children within that family might not see it the same as me, and I know that they listen and watch to our podcast. So I just want to be very clear from where I was sitting. And what made me think that, Bev, was when we did anything perceived to be wrong, our step siblings would tell their mum and we would get into trouble for it. But when we tried to share any wrongdoing with my dad would say, you cannot keep pitching each other against each other. The stepmom is in charge and she will sort out things. So my dad never protected us. So it seemed like she had the upper hand in their relationship. And I don't think that their relationship was physical. It was more about shouting, coercion, and, you know, really abusing the children more than each other. But that dynamic that we had with the step siblings, it was very toxic. And then just to quickly catch on to the next domestic violence household was with my mum and my stepdad. But there was a lot of alcohol in that relationship, and it was my stepdad that was the alcoholic, who used to create situations so that he could pick an argument and meter out blame and then punishment. So from 0 to 16, we've experienced it from all different angles and in different ways. And what you see either puts you off that kind of living for life, i.e., you become not liking any kind of violence, not liking any kind of shouting, anything can trigger you. Or if that's all you see and you know no different, you might then act in the same way because you don't know no different. And I'm not excusing it or condoning it, but I'm just trying to explain and explore. What about you?
Well, for me, with my parents, I've always said that my mum and dad, that the power struggle wasn't there when it became physical, because my mum and dad would actually have physical fights. So sometimes it would be my mum and sometimes it would be my dad. It, you know, from what I witnessed, it really was both. Do you see what I mean in that respect? Obviously, there are some things I don't understand because I was a young child, but it's really challenging because obviously I've had to unpick this as well as you know, in my adulthood as a child, because I was only at home until I was 4, and then between the age of 10 to 13. So yes, my father was the one who sexually assaulted me, and that's where he's placed. But our mum was abusive as well in different ways. But coming from what is understood as domestic violence, my mum and dad couldn't just have a conversation. It would go from 0 to 100 within seconds. So when I think about an incident with my mum, she was tidying up the bedroom and they started having an argument, and before I knew it, my mum picked up a clock. And the reason why I remember this clock, I actually won that clock, gave it to my mum. And she picked this clock up and she threw it at my dad, and it just missed me. So as a young child, I was home for the weekend because I was in care then, but I was in the bedroom, which was a normal, you know, family incident, as in tidying the bedroom with my mum. And before we knew it, when my dad walked in, it escalated. But what was really safe suddenly became unsafe.
Yeah. So it's just like normal everyday events really could just set someone off and become a violent event.
Yeah. And then later on, when we were living at home, my mum and dad would go to work, the pair of them, but they didn't come home for dinner. But I would know that the house had to be spotless, because when they came home drunk, if it wasn't spotless, I'd be the one who'd be hauled out of bed.
Yeah.
So it's really weird, because we can understand abuse towards a child, but we don't look at it when we're witnessing different things, because my mum looked like she was a victim in some ways, and she
Yeah.
was with my dad, but in other ways she wasn't, because she also had a boyfriend,
Right.
which was my mum and dad's boss, and my dad was very aware of.
Wow. Okay.
So can you see
Yes.
how
Yeah,
complicated?
yeah.
So
Very complicated.
to the outside world, and growing up for a long time, I would say that my mum was controlled by my dad, and
Yeah.
outsiders looking in. But actually, it's only through unpicking it that it's no, actually, they had control in different areas.
Yeah. Did they pick on you children as a couple, or
My
did they fight
mum,
over you?
yeah, my mum did emotionally.
Yeah.
My dad did physically.
Yeah.
So emotionally, if you got upset for anything, and I did one night when, and I don't mind sharing, um, she had her boyfriend upstairs, and I could hear, and my dad was walking from the back room to the front door and backwards.
Right.
And my mum's bedroom was above ours, because my sister and I shared a room at the front of the house, and it was an old bed. So I don't need to keep
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
explaining. I could
No.
hear the bed,
Yeah.
and I was in tears. And my dad actually came in and said, "What's the matter?" And I just said, "Nothing, I'm upset." He obviously realised. And in the
Yeah.
morning, when I had to take a drink up to my mum, that my mum would call out, "Cup of tea, cup of tea." Um, I went upstairs with a cup of tea. I would have been about 12 then, coming on 13. And she made a comment about, you can't do anything without your kids um, making you feel guilty or having something to say.
Wow.
And that gives you an example of what was
Yeah.
happening there. So she was very much emotionally, and she'd also, and this took a lot of unpicking, she'd favourite different children. She'd literally be separating us.
Yeah.
But then my dad was physical towards the boys. And I remember one time seeing my brother get beaten really badly by my
Yeah.
dad. And that feeling of not being able to stop it,
Mm-hmm.
even today, talking about it was awful, and it still has that impact. And that
Yeah.
when he used to come in drunk, pretending that you were asleep, but he'd haul you out of bed sometimes
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
and knock you on the head with the bills. And I was 13 just before we went back into care when he did that another time. And he did it so hard, it hit me on the head, but there was no apology. You just weren't allowed to cry,
Yeah.
because otherwise you get another one.
Yeah.
And it's really weird how you learn not to show your emotions.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
And you also learn, that sound of that key in the lock. You learn to, like, make yourself as small as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and yet, and this is where the control comes in, but you don't always see it. If you were to ask me as a young child who was worse, I'd say my mum, right? Because my dad would be the one who would leave the pub to come home and unlock the cupboard if he was to come home, so that we could make a sandwich for tea. Or he'd
Yeah.
be the one that would leave some of his food, or he'd be the one to give us, a couple of quid so we could go down to the chip shop. So it was really that there's the coercive
Yeah.
part of the control. So both my parents were toxic, but I didn't realize any of this. This
No.
was all normal, even though I was in children's home. It wasn't until I was in late teenage that I started to think, hold on a minute, these relationships in the children's home are different.
Yes.
And I never liked getting into trouble. because it meant
No.
drawing attention to myself.
And consequences.
Absolutely. Um, and didn't like breaking the rules. I'm not saying I'm a human being. I'm not saying I've never broken a rule, but didn't
Yeah.
like it.
Yeah.
And it was, I just thought that was normal. I thought it was me, and I took it all on me. The responsibility was, if I'd been better, if I'd cleaned the house more, if I'd done this, if I'd done that.
I'm smiling because there's so many similarities, Bev. I just want to give some examples of what was going on in our household. With mum and dad, the biological parents, I was 7 when they split. So I can't remember seeing or hearing the hitting, the shouting, whatever. But what I do remember is on a Sunday morning, cleaning this old gas fire, and we've spoken about this before, I was cleaning the hell out of it.
Yes.
And I remember having the thought that this makes my mum happy, because when my mum comes downstairs and she goes, oh, wow, that looks really good. That's, you know, that's brilliant. I felt that when she praised me for doing the cleaning, then everything in the household was happy and nice and calm. So there must have been something going on that I've completely blocked out. But I just know that if I cleaned, mum was happy and everything in the household seemed to be okay. And then
Yes.
obviously when mum left, we found out that things weren't okay. But then when dad was with stepmum, as I said, she was a very shouty person, and she was very handy with not only her hands, but with weapons like a cane and whatever. Don't want to trigger anybody, but she would create events like a pound has gone missing, and back then a pound was a lot of money.
Mm.
So she would leave money around to see if any of us would steal it, to then mete out punishment. So it was almost like an invite to steal. And the thing is, we would steal some money because we were hungry, because we wasn't looked after. So we knew that money bought food. And the times that we could steal money to buy the food was better than us going to the shops to steal the food without the money. You know, so we would occasionally, and it would usually be my brothers who would steal some money, thinking that she wouldn't notice, but she knew exactly what she had, where she had. And as soon as it went missing, because she knew it would go missing because we were hungry, she'd line us all up. And then she would like, look at me, look at me. Who did it? Who did it? Like, and we wouldn't all, we'll be quaking in our boots, basically. And then she would like try and get us to split on each other, which we tried not to do. And then she would end up hitting all of us until she got someone to confess. And it was just plain torture, Bev.
Yeah.
It's mind games, it's torture, and it's palpable. I can, like you said, it brings up a trigger. So she would do that with us on many occasions. And then with stepdad and mum, I would like to say that mum wasn't abusive, but she was. Stepdad was abusive towards her, and he was abusive towards us in different ways. And I don't really want to talk on behalf of my sister here, so I'm not going to say, but there was sexual abuse, physical abuse, psychological abuse. He would beat my mum up. Everyone knew that the bruises and the black eyes were because of him. We all knew that when mum fell down the stairs or accidentally fell into a door, it was him. But we'd say to mum, why is he hitting you? Why are you allowing it? Because we were teenagers, you know, at this time. And she was like, oh, no, it wasn't him. I had an accident. And we're like, we weren't born yesterday. You know what I'm saying? But there was a lot of that going on. But as you were saying about the key in the door, ours was Sunday. You used to go out, go down the pub. Then football used to come on, and we knew that he'd always come back before football. The key goes in the door. We were used to scatter because we knew that an argument was going to ensue. The dinner would be uprooted and everything would start just going, you know, like the Wild West. Yeah. So when people say domestic violence, and when they say, you know, about the person who is the victim in the adult relationship, they don't truly understand or talk about what it is that we're sharing right now. I've never heard it spoken about.
No, and also, you know, it's like anything. When you are the adult in that relationship, and sadly, you don't realize at the beginning, you know, when I look back, you know, it was only, you know, as I said, I started my counselling when I was in my early 30s, when I had my 2 children, and that was being a victim survivor of sexual abuse. I never even considered anything else. I thought I was in a loving
Right.
marriage. I thought that, yeah, he was a bit controlling, but I thought jealous. You know, I took that because he loves me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
uh, when somebody gave me a document, this was years after I'd left him. It was a leaflet about domestic violence and safety. I was like, oh no, I don't need that, thank you. He only hit me the once.
Mm-hmm.
Only the
Yeah.
once. I justified it. And and I'm laughing now because when I think back, the once I came out of hospital having a nose operation because I'd cut away some bone, and he punched me in the nose 2 days later, and you can imagine the blood.
Yeah.
Only the once. I mean, you couldn't get any worse. I didn't have any black eyes from the operation. I got it
From
from
him.
from
Yeah.
him. Um, and I told other people it was an accident that
Yeah.
you know, I covered it up. Yes, I was angry with him, but I covered it up because I was ashamed. You know,
Yeah.
and at that time I hadn't unpicked my childhood either.
No, because why
So
would you?
it was normal.
You don't know, do you, until you know?
Yeah, and also, my ex-husband was very different to my parents. He wasn't chaotic. He liked everything in order. There was a
Yeah.
certain way. But when I look back now and with all the work, you know, and even some parts of it now, you know, I'll be very frank. I'm only now really like, wow. You know, when we learn about domestic
Yeah.
violence, you know, and with the things that have come in, like, wow, I accepted that as being part of a family.
Yeah.
And that's when, as a parent, the worst thing is like, why didn't I stand up more?
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to, for my own children, bring them up in a happy relationship.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't want them growing up in the chaos of fights and that. So what I did do, and we've mentioned this before, I created this perfect family. And I learned not to say the wrong thing. And I learned that, you know, dinner would be ready. Do you see what I mean? And we'd have this
Yeah.
family dinner, and sometimes I'd be quiet, and it'd be hard for me to swallow, but I'd swallow because I didn't want my children to see a fight going on. But
Yeah.
now I can see that actually I can see, I can take ownership of the part, you know, that is like, that wasn't true for my children either.
And this is the thing, isn't it? Sometimes I'm just wondering if my mum left the first relationship, so she knew that it was domestic violence. But I wonder how long she lived with it, not knowing that it was what it was. And then again, when she got into her second relationship, that was everyone could see it,
Yeah.
but my mum wouldn't take ownership of it until I said to her one day, like, and I've shared this so many times before, I can pay to get you a flat. I can get you out of here. Then once you're out of here, then all of your children will come and see you, because they're not going to come and see you whilst you're in a relationship that is dysfunctional and abusive, because we don't want that around our kids. So you don't get to see any of the grandchildren because you're still in that relationship. And she turned around and said to me, better the devil I know. So it was more scary for her to leave the relationship, start all over again with all of her freedom, with all of her kids around her. Maybe not all of them, because some of them didn't want anything to do with her in the end, and I don't blame them for what she put them through. But she said, the better the devil I know. And I knew then that she would never gonna leave him, ever. And she
Yep.
didn't.
No, and you know, there's lots of different reasons why you don't realize at first, but also when you make the decision. I remember when I made the decision, you know, that I wasn't going to stay. It took another 6 months before I actually left,
Yeah.
because you are thinking of the children, ironically. And then
Yeah.
when I did leave, you try telling someone that you're not going back to them. You know,
Yeah.
I wasn't going to shout, because shouting, screaming didn't do anything, because that would evoke physical. The threats were always there. The physical
Yeah.
threats were always there. They were never taken away. And I even had police protection, but then they find your Achilles heel. They
Yeah.
find the thing that means the most to you, and they use that against you.
And
And
that's
that
usually
was,
the children.
absolutely. And that's, I can't say anything more about that at the moment,
I
because
know.
that's
Yeah.
their story.
Yeah.
And they, you know, we're open and honest about this. I have my ways of seeing things, and there's some things I've never told them, and probably some things I never will. You know,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want them to have a relationship with both parents, but this is when it goes on to alienation. There's
Yes.
some parents who can't see their children for valid reasons, but when a parent alienates children against the other parent, that is another form of domestic abuse, domestic violence, and it punishes the children.
It does. When my dad and my stepmom were together and my mum left the home, it took my mum 4 years to go through the family courts in Bromley to actually get custody of us. And I think she only got custody of us because my dad by that time was in remand, was on remand, because he had convictions of child sexual abuse against some of my siblings and my sister. And my stepmom, she loved coming home to tell us that mum didn't win the court case at that point, but she was getting access to us. So we ended up going to my mum's at weekends sometimes, whilst my dad was in prison. And then eventually my stepmom turned around, and when my mum had won custody of us, it wasn't, oh, your mum was won custody. It was, I've given you up because you're all brats and you're all this and you
Yeah,
cost me so much and you yeah. But even with going to mum's for weekends when there was access and dad having custody, they were always playing off. You know, even my mum was like, oh, your dad's this, your dad's that, he's done this, he's done that. And your children, you don't understand adult world. And then when we go back to stepmom, it's like, oh, your mum's this, your mum's that. And you just don't, you end up people pleasing both parents.
your puppet. And that's one thing I never wanted my children to be, is
And it's
puppets.
hard, you
It's
can't.
very hard. And then there's the external judgment as well, for the children as well. You know,
Yeah.
the impact, because we recognize the impact for the adults, so that it's the impact for the children that is
Yeah.
extremely hard, because that's, you know, they're having to learn coping strategies, as we've
Yeah.
shared here. They also, when the abuse against, you know, and they're alienated against another parent, what happens? They're stopped from having a relationship with that parent, believing that that parent is the bad person, is a
Yeah.
bad person, you know. Whereas, so there's no, and then also the dynamics were unfair in our relationship in that respect, because I didn't have parents behind me to back me up either.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's very hard for children, because they're looking at the black and white, they're listening to the adults around them, and they're going to listen, you know, to the
Well, we
adults,
can't.
because it's what they don't have choice. That's what we, as a society as well, what we say is, you know, respect your elders, respect your parents.
And not only that, when you're with the family that is fussing the other family, let's put it that way, if you don't go along with what you're being told in the household that you're in, and you go against that, you're setting yourself up for consequences. So you learn to mask, and you learn to say things that you don't truly believe, potentially, and you learn to not trust anybody, because you can see it from all sides, you know, as a child and young person. Even if you don't understand it, you can definitely see it and you can definitely feel it, because it's all about survival.
Yeah, and coming from a childhood that was chaotic, was abusive in all forms, I tried to create this very peaceful environment
Yeah,
for my children. But when I look at it now, you know, under the hard light, and I'm being 100% honest here in my, you know, in parenting, did I try and over create that? You know, is that fair to my children? Not that my intention was
you
wrong.
did your best. Yeah,
I parented with the right intention, but
yeah,
did they learn to navigate? Like, no, actually, that's not right. But again, you know, sadly, I repeated some cycles because, you know, with my ex-husband, you couldn't say, no, actually, I don't agree. You couldn't hold a boundary because there would
no,
be a threat. There'd be
yeah,
fit. And I did. Don't think I completely was a walkover. Absolutely not. I held my best. It took me a long time to see that as well. You know, one incident when one of my children got smacked extremely hard by my ex-husband when he was angry.
yeah,
And yeah, something had gone wrong, but no way did one of my children deserve, either of my
deserve.
children deserve to
Yeah,
be hit on that level in any way, shape, or form.
no, yeah,
Um, so I put a flannel on them and that they could barely get their breath. They were
right,
sobbing so much. And I did go downstairs and he was on the settee. And I challenged him and I said,
yeah,
don't you ever touch one of my children ever again. Right.
yeah,
And with that, he just sat there and said, see this, you talk to me like that again and you'll get some of it as well. And I just went, don't you even think about it. And
yeah,
calmly walked out of the sitting room, the kitchen, and went into the garden. And I was like,
shaking. Yeah,
yeah, because I would have stood in front of him and
yeah,
taken the blows rather than, but you do that, but then I'm not saying it would be right. The number of times as a parent you look back, what could I have done differently? When could I have stopped that? But I didn't have the boundaries right at the beginning to put in. And it happens slowly. That's not an
yeah,
excuse. You know, we see it when we're supporting and facilitating in your groups, and I've heard it in others. You know, we hear stories from different people, whether
yeah,
they be men, women, and I've um, had some men tell me things, and I've referred them on to men charities, and they're like, am I exaggerating this?
mm-hmm,
Am I over sensitive? Because that's what they've been told as well. And I'm like,
yeah,
no, that is not
yeah,
acceptable. That,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
thing, we don't understand where we're in it because we've been told so much that,
yeah,
and that's
yeah,
the coercive control as well.
yeah.
So sorry, Chris,
I
I'm
was just
carrying on there.
thinking, really, when we've gone through such dysfunction and chaos and abuse, it would be really helpful, wouldn't it, that before you become a parent, you've said this before, that we all go on these parenting courses, because then we would all learn what we should all be doing. You know, most of it does come, I would say, naturally to most people. However, if you've come from a place of dysfunction and abuse, then you might be living with certain beliefs, or you might be managing your life with negative coping mechanisms, and that will blight your potential parenthood. And it could also cause your children further harm if you don't talk about what went on for you, and if you don't change up those coping mechanisms. So I just think, like, as an intervention before anyone becomes a parent, then perhaps we should have all gone on a parenting course, so we're all from the same place, you
And
know.
that would be lovely. I mean, I think it should even start in schools as well. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
this word support shouldn't just be in crisis.
No.
This
Or
word,
after the event.
yeah, this word support needs to be like, let's educate adults.
Yeah,
Let's like offer them parenting, not as a tick box. Let's
No.
open the conversations.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts around it? Someone's going to say that, well, actually, a good smack won't do any harm. Do you see what I mean? Okay, where does that belief come from?
Yeah.
What do you deem as a good smack? Rather than us go, whoa, no way. Let's be able to have those conversations in a safe place, so that if it's part of someone's culture or how they've been brought up, they can understand, I'd not considered that, but how do I, I remember smacking my
What do I
children's
do?
hands. Yeah.
What do we do differently? Yeah.
Yeah. And you're never always going to get a perfect, we all agree, but at least we know then afterwards, if we're struggling, where can we go to? Without blame, because there's a lot of blame as a parent. Also for the children, though, let's have these conversations. And I know that some schools do it, and I know that there's that documentary, Resilience, where they do the letter with the school teacher, don't they? And she sends them a letter, and the children are encouraged to write, and she says nobody has the right to hit you. So it's not saying of your parents, it's teaching them values, but from a non-judgmental way, and the children can write in their letters if something's happening, if someone's hit them or someone's not being nice to them. And if we have more discussions around this, we're teaching what boundaries are in relationships and what looks more normal. And I'm not saying we'd ever stop it completely, but what we would do is enable children, young people, to start questioning, that doesn't feel right. It's okay for me to tell someone at school. It's also for the adults, the teachers, to think, that young person's told me that. I can't just ignore it. I need to share that with somebody else and log it, report it.
Yeah. So going back to this parental alienation, and especially in the family court situation, you'll usually find, and I'm generalizing here, you'll usually find that the male in the parent relationship is the perpetrator in most cases, in the cases that I've looked at and seen. And you'll find that the woman, the mum, is the victim. And you'll find that when they go through family court, because they've got a principle of they want to unite family and not break families up, the mum, if she turns around and says, especially in domestic violence cases, if she turns around and says, I've got worries or concerns based on evidence that stepdad is abusing children, she would often be the one that's being called out for parental alienation. And in most cases, the children will then be given to the dad for custody reasons. And people might be shouting at the screen right now saying that's not true. The thing is, it is true. The Victims Commissioner for London and lots of charities have seen this in action, and they're now brought it to the public arena for public awareness and to try and stop this happening. So in these cases, it's almost like the courts bring in these experts that are not experts, and as a result of mum saying there's sexual abuse happening, they're either told to drop it, or if they carry on with it, they will lose custody. And this has happened in many cases. And it's got to stop, because this is all the coercion, it's the control, it's the control through the children over mum. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just awful.
My children were older when they went to live with their dad. They were teenagers. But I was also told that because of your background,
Right.
you're a
Because
bad
you'd gone
parent.
through.
Yeah.
Wow.
You're ruining your own children's lives. And so, yes, I did go to a solicitor, and there were different things in place. But yeah, that's all I can say, because obviously
I know.
I don't think my children listen to this podcast, but they're adults now. They've got their own families, so they have their story to tell, and I'm very aware of that. But yeah, it all comes under domestic violence. And people think that when you leave, that's the end of it. Sadly, it's not. But what you can do for anyone who's listening right now, and some light bulbs are going on and they're thinking, and this is why we do this podcast. The first thing I would say now, that we didn't have so much back then, go and get some support. There are so many places. I'm eternally grateful for the leaflet that the woman put into my hand, even though I didn't agree with it at first. But now I'd say, you know, there's groups on Facebook you can go to if you don't want to go in person. You can contact so many charities, and nobody says like, oh, what level are you before you come in? It's not about that. It's about welcome. Come into our group. You don't have to say anything. You don't, you know, but there's support there. You can even ask the questions, is this abuse? And I know that sounds futile to some people, and other people will be jumping up and down and saying, of course they know, of course no.
Not
Unless you're in that place,
Yeah.
you don't know. So, you know, what I'd say is, please go for some, you know, reach out for some support so that, and for your children.
Organisations like Refuge and Women's Aid, if you're the female victim, domestic violence, and equally there's male charities out there like Mankind. I've forgotten what the other one is called.
Well, we'll look at a couple and we'll put them underneath this
100%.
video and this podcast. So as we come to an end, thank you so much again for listening. We have covered a lot, as we normally do in all of these conversations. So if anything's touched you and you want a bit of more support, or, you know, maybe you're thinking, oh, is this me? You know what? It doesn't hurt to ask. You can contact us by email, breakingthecycle2stepforward@gmail.com. Chris, before we go, is there one last thing that you would like to say?
Other than, if you find yourself in an abusive relationship, leaving it is often the most crucial and critical time. So you probably will need help leaving an abusive relationship if you are in one. So do reach out and get that help and support before you actually enact it, because there's a lot of victims who are killed before they ever get to leave, or when they leave, their life is made a living hell. So to try and put that into place before you leave would probably be a good idea, to look into it and to get yourself that help and support.
100%. And I did have some support, so I'm not going to say I didn't have any. I did have, and they were amazing as well. Have I ever regretted leaving? Absolutely not. So was it challenging? Yes, it was. And for anyone listening, it was difficult, but get that support. It really makes a difference.
And can I just say, Bev, for all of those that don't think that children and young people don't take on what's going on, they're like little sponges. They do. They see, they hear, they feel. So what if you are in a relationship because you think it'd be better for your children, then please just think again and get the help and support.
Yeah, absolutely. I think support is the key thing.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for everyone listening, and please look after yourself with self-care, because we have spoken about a lot of emotive things today.
Yeah, we've gone probably deeper than what we've ever gone before, I think, as well. So yeah, self-care for us, Bev.
Absolutely.
All right then, bye everyone, see you next time.
Bye.